so we should be showing up. We are live.
We're live. We're gonna get all the questions. I'm copy pasting whatever someone wanted to know specifically on S550 stuff. We'll just delve into it with whatever you want to kind of lead off with. Obviously, this is live, John, on the Lund Racing YouTube channel.
Yes, we have 6 watching, so hopefully more people start popping in.
Is there any topics you wanted to cover on a personal level before we get started on some of the frequently asked questions that people
want? Yeah, I'll read off the stuff that people commented with on our posts. There's a guy on Facebook. His name's Robert. He said, "What's the best way to go about tracking down false knock, especially if you've already gone through the exhaust system?" Well, first of all, what's up, Jeremiah? What's up, Dan? I would say the exhaust system isn't always the culprit, right? For false knock, it could be suspension, really could be anything. The knock sensors sit in the valley of the engine block, and the sensitivity can be modified in the tune. Typically, we don't like to mess with it at all, and the only time we will is everything's been exhausted as far as hunting down, what would be considered false knock. And maybe we can dive into what false knock it is. I know that you've talked about it before on YouTube videos, but we can give a quick definition of it. But then after we've exhausted options, we will give the customer the choice, and we provide a disclaimer that they sign off on as far as us desensitizing to eliminate the PCM from prematurely retarding ignition timing to protect against what it thinks is detonation happening. So the PCM is only as good as what the sensors are doing. So, and sometimes they can lie. So false knock in, let's say, a naturally aspirated application has a loud exhaust, aftermarket, bigger diameter, things fit a little bit tighter. So you think when you're putting it on, it's touching somewhere, but you're thinking it's not going to matter much. Well, probably 15, 20 years ago, it probably didn't matter much. But on these cars with the knock sensors sitting there, harmonics from that vibration can reverberate up the exhaust into the head, down into the block, and it picks up that small amount of NVH. So when it does, the knock sensors go off and tell the PCM, hey, we think there's detonation or knock, so it will pull timing. Typically, we can tell on the data log what is false and what isn't, depending on when it happens. Sometimes when you see a car go watt at low RPM and it's on E85, so it's not, it's hot, it's probably not going to have detonation. It spikes the knock retard and then tapers off in like a step fashion. When we see that, we typically say it's probably false knock. You need to go hunt it down. So Robert is asking, what's the best way to track it? I know that there's been some videos and other explanations about people banging on the exhaust because it acts as a tuning fork. And if you don't know what a tuning fork is, go YouTube it. That's the harmonic noise change that the knock sensor would be picking up. So if you bang on the exhaust and you hear it vibrate somewhere, it's most likely hitting. And you got to remember that when the engine torques under acceleration, it's going to twist, and that changes where things start rubbing. That may not be when the engine's off and you're underneath the car. So I don't know if you have anything to add. If you've
typically a lot of people would look at the exhaust as the culprit, but honestly, I've seen the AC stud. The AC line has a stud that sticks out a decent amount, and depending on the long tube header that you have installed, something like a stainless works, because the stainless works header actually sticks out. The primaries come out a little further. Cooks in American Racing make it slightly tighter, but also long tube header recently came out with a header, and theirs is similar to stainless where it sticks out a little more. So that stud might touch the exhaust. So it's not necessarily the exhaust causing it, it's the torquing of the engine like you spoke of that allows it to hit that stud and reverberate, and your car will see 19 degrees of timing naturally aspirated, and you're going, well, what's going on? So then when you shave down that stud, and anything that can potentially touch the engine can potentially, make the knock sensors go off. On TVS equipped Mustangs, for whatever reason, 2.3s specifically tend to have a little more of a noisy of a blower. And sometimes if you have good fuel and we disclaim it, we will kick back the sensitivity slightly. But if it's very rare that we have to do that, because the cars, as long as everything's installed properly, the blower was clearanced properly, all the brackets were clearanced properly, typically you don't have knock issues on any blower setup.
Yeah, and Melvin just commented and said he had some false knock from vibrations coming from the converter inspection plate being loose, and that's a perfect example of something that's not related to the exhaust. I know I've seen even plastic intakes rubbing up on the hood. You wouldn't think plastic would cause it, but sure enough, it was causing a little bit of vibration, and it reverberated through the intake manifold.
Mass airflow sensors. So if you have an aftermarket cold air intake, and the actual cold air intake is, let's say you didn't put the shield on, or you were cheap and you kind of installed it all a little bit on the jank side, if the filter or anything rubs and it hits and it's a little loose, that will also cause not just a little false knock, a lot of false knock. And I'm like, why? But think about it. When you really think about it, it's attached to the throttle body, and the engine will go, yeah, there must be detonation happening because I hear the exact same noise as if it was detonating.
Yep.
Kickbacks all their timing.
And intercooler piping from any of the blow through kits, centrifugal, turbo. It's usually we see more of it on blown applications. We see it there because the piping snakes through, the whole front end of the car, and it'll rub when the engine's twisting, and sometimes it shifts. So I had one customer, his name's Zach, a few years ago. He went and insulated all the positions with rubber, and he fixed it. So every time it would twist, it would just be metal on rubber and then metal, so that it would never cause a harmonic noise. So, and
remember, if you have a nitrous kit, you got to make sure that if you have a turbo kit, you got to remember that your nitrous kit that you need for the turbo isn't hitting anywhere, causing false knock issues.
Touche. Oh man, I'm not even going to get into that. We've exhausted that today.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's good times.
Oh my goodness.
So I think that'll cover on false knock stuff, because honestly, we've exhausted almost everything that could cause false knock.
Yeah, and the suspension is another one. But I rarely see suspension, but sometimes when you have solid bushings or really hard bushings, things tend to make more NVH in the back. And if you on an IRS car, if you get wheel hop on a shift for whatever reason, if it shakes and vibrates, it'll go all the way up.
So especially on the 1-2 shift, if like on the 1-2 shift, you're sideways and you stay in it, it can cause some bad things to happen. So if I were you, I would stay in it on a 1-2 shift, turning left anyway. Just saying.
Oh my goodness. Oh man.
It's fun. It's fun.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, we're getting a lot of questions here. But anyway, let's keep on topic, and then we can always go back to those questions later on. You had the questions that were on Instagram.
Yeah, I'm watching these too to see if anybody has anything related. Okay. Somebody said, Mr. Nitro, my TTS 550 is having a slight miss at idle and sometimes part throttle. What should I start chasing? Spark plugs could be one thing related to it. I would need more details on what injectors and turbo kit it is. Somebody just paid us $1.
Just for the hell of it. There's not even a question attached.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for the money.
I've seen guys that monitor long-term fuel trims. It's a good way to see if your MAF curve is dialed in. How tight do you aim to get fuel trims? 2, 3, 5%. I'd have to go find, this was Brian Thompson. I'd have to go find the document somewhere. I have something from Ford a long time ago. I think they try to keep it within 10% OEM. But I've seen some OEM calibrations, like my 2.7 pickup truck, EcoBoost. I've seen the fuel trims and the long trims go way far out in left field, but it didn't. It's fine and it runs fine. So, and that could be during a transition somewhere that you're rarely in. So our best practice is we have adaptive disabled, which is the long-term fuel trims. We try to get the fuel trims within 5%, close as possible. We do a technique called histogramming with the MAF curve, which is basically, we tell you to do one big data log, and we load it up in our data logging software, and we have the MAF curve pre-populated for that particular application, and we have the fuel trims in one of the axes, and it takes an average throughout the whole log. So if you do a 30-minute log, it's usually pretty good data. It takes an average of all these different spots that it hits, and we apply that correction, and we basically rinse and repeat that a few times, and you get the fuel trims. I've seen some within 1%, and then all we do after that is we flip adaptive back on, and typically when people send us a log a couple months later, the adaptive's only added maybe 2 or 3% in different areas, and it kind of smooths out the drivability. And back to our last video we had, when you get those fuel trims real tight, it makes the throttle calibration that much refined. So it makes everything feel smooth. And I've had a lot of guys, say that same thing. If their trims are off 20%, when you correct it, they come back and say, wow, it runs much better. Well, the air fuel wasn't any different. So it has to do with how the throttle logic works on the Ford. So
looks like your father online asking questions, or was that you?
What's that?
It looks like your father's online answering questions, or was that you?
John Lund, it would be senior.
Okay. So now AKBNB asked about MBT Spark chasing it on an unloaded dyno with a Motec ECU. Do you want to even delve into that? Because, I mean, that's kind of like a loaded question. No pun intended.
Any way to find MBT at part throttle with a dyno like this?
An unloaded dyno jet like we have.
What's an FSAE car? You know what that acronym is?
I have no idea what FSAE stands for. No idea. Maybe I'm sure he'll chime in.
Yeah, we'll wait to get a little bit more detail. Basically, he could, if it's a naturally aspirated car, you could, if you're familiar with tuning a Coyote, let's say it's a Coyote, based on some research, what they like for timing. That's kind of where you start. And then if the Motec ECU has NOx sensors and you have good gas, then you can start there, see what the NOx sensors are doing, and add. But
he said it's like a formula. It's like a formula go-kart size F1 car. It's like a little mini formula.
Interesting. That's the way I would do it if it has NOx sensors. That's really only, like, how do you have feedback other than being able to pull the spark plugs after you do a certain run? I mean, at that point, you really have to have some kind of data feedback to know if you're measuring. He's talking about measuring the change though on a dyno jet, which would be difficult because it'd have to be a loaded dyno jet, and you're going to have to load it a certain way and then record the pole at part throttle. So you would almost have to go in the tune and limit the throttle angle at different throttle angles to change your load. So you can say, this is my watt, but it's 50% throttle angle. So that's the way I would do it, at least. I'm going to get back to the question. I think the people that post it on Facebook get precedent.
Exactly, because they did it beforehand.
Yeah, so you did your homework.
We can always go back and cherry pick. And Senior was online telling everyone what the deal is. Just
Yeah,
we got to remind Tina not to chastise our fans. Okay, they're fans.
yeah. Treat them like you would talk to them in person.
Exactly. Exactly. Well,
um,
yeah, it depends on the person.
sometimes I talk to people the same way. So, B Brooks 270 from Instagram asked 4R200 converter suggestions for turbo guys, and then he also asked preferred trans brake type D versus type B, and I had to ask him about that, and I got clarification. So
Okay.
I'll start with the trans brake. So we run the uh, clutch B and clutch C combination on our blue car and our gray car. The reason is we had the D and C combination, and we had some creep. And what's that mean? So you come up on the two-step on the trans brake, and the car started rolling forward. And um, our thought was maybe that clutch, the D clutch, fully uh, wasn't able to hold the torque maybe for that application. I know that others have used it with success, but we went to B and C, and it locks the trans real well because they're two pretty large clutches.
Mm-hmm.
And we used that with success on our blue car all year last year with no ill effect and launching over 4,000 RPM. So um, as far as the 4R200 converter, uh, really not just for turbo guys, but for any of the 4R200, I have been recommending the Circle D 252 millimeter. Looks like your lens is unfocused.
Oh, really? Well, that's just my awesome phone just being awesome.
So mine requires an adapter, and yours doesn't focus.
Mine doesn't focus. Mine just hates my guts. I have Wi-Fi on and everything, and if I move slightly, it doesn't focus properly. So
That's all right. So the converter that I like is the Circle D 252 millimeter 1X. So I don't know what the numbers and letters mean as far as after the 252, but the 252 is the diameter of it.
okay,
And the reason that I prefer that, A, is because we had experience with it, really good experience. And it was the out of the box one, just with the lockup clutches removed. And the reason we removed those is a little bit of weight. And there was some speculation that maybe the clutches were dragging on one of the early 252s we tested in Joey's car.
okay,
So we asked Chris at Circle D to remove them so we didn't have any dragging problems. And the converter unlocked couples really well. If
so we
you
did
don't
not run lockup with our blue car.
Correct, no lockup. And we had, when the converter is coupled, and if you don't know what that means, that's a completely different technical discussion, and it needs pictures and stuff. But you can go Google, YouTube converter operation, and there's some really smart people that explain it. So coupling has to do with the slip the converter has, and it would get down, 7% slip at 1,300 plus the tire, which is really good
Exactly.
for a converter unlocked. So we prefer that one up to, I would say, up to the 1250, 1,300 range. Beyond that, I think it starts to push the converter a little bit, and it doesn't couple as well, and you start to see more slip because it's just so much torque. So we actually have we have the same converter going back in, but we have a different stator for it, and the stator is going to change the stall. So we wanted the stall to be a little lower to tighten the converter up, and then the couple point will be stretched out. So it'll actually have, I call it, less drama. So when you come out of the hole, it'll flash, and it used to flash real hard and couple real fast, so it tighten up real quick.
Right.
I want it to be a little bit later, and now that we have a tighter stall, it won't be as much drama coming out, and it'll have a much more progressive tightening effect, which means that load on the tire will be less dramatic. Because the biggest problem we had in first gear, even with the 274 first, our starting line ratio was really good, but if we tried to ramp the power in real hard, it would blow the tires. It was like a blower car. So going back to our other conversation, it would do a really nice burnout. Senior did so many of those. I mean, I have so many logs where he would stay in it after that, and 180 mile an hour on the data log spinning through third, and the transmission lived. So did the engine. So, but that's not ideal. You want to be able to come out and have a progressive I guess it's torque multiplication, but you want it to be progressive so that you don't have to pull a bunch of timing out and ramp it in differently or change how your boost ramp is. You want to be able to get all the power in as quickly as possible and let the converter tame the beast. So, and that's what we're going to try to do. So, as for turbo guys versus supercharged guys, I think that 1X works really well. I know I kept talking to you about it, but I have a Whipple car that's way less power than your car is, and he has the 1X, and he had a 6R80 in it before with I think a 2C, and he did 990s. He went to the 4R200 at roughly the same power level with the 252 unlocked, and he went 960s. So
wow. About 310 seems to be I don't want to say the norm because there is no norm, but
yeah.
my red car, with a 6R80 and a big converter, it went 940s, and then 4R200 went 91. So
Yeah.
it seems to be 3/10 or so what the 4R200 is worth at that power level.
Right. And I think with this converter and then maybe a little bit of a gear change in yours, it would have probably gone an 8.
Well,
yeah. I think just, you tweak different areas and we could have gotten it there. So people with the same power level and weight with the right setup, it's definitely possible. So is there anything? I haven't even been looking at the other.
No, some just typical questions that are good. They're good questions, but some of them you really can't get into without, I don't know, giving away too much, in my opinion. There's a gentleman, Brian Thompson, asks a good example, right? Could you expand on why long tube headers typically do not need revisions over factory manifolds? Does the PCM just learn the error for transport delay and fueling? I mean,
yes. So it's called the official logic isn't probably called this, but it's adaptive O2 transport delay. So really, when you have a closed loop fuel control with a wideband, it learns really, really fast. And there's some adaptive tables that we can adjust to speed it up, and we do already in our tunes. But it doesn't really need it. You could put long tubes on a bone stock car. Minus it, it may have some rear O2 codes, but that's about it. But it would idle run fine, and you could go wide open throttle and not have to change anything. Mm-hmm. So the fueling and all the fuel trims are going to be correct. So I just think that's kind of an old school thing, maybe with the older, slower computers like EEC5s, where you had to add in transport delay in order to help the front O2s see heat. So
yep,
that's really what it's about. Let's go back.
Instagram stuff.
Yeah, I will. I had another trans brake question, but we'll see how it goes before we get into that one. I think you and I discussed that off the record.
Right.
Slow Boogie asks, who's actually tuning the vehicles at Lund Racing? Is it a collaborative effort or the person that emails you back? Can you ask for specific tuners? So we'll start on his last question. Yes, you can ask for specific tuners, but we all use the same base calibration. I call it base. It's our production calibration. And for any programmers that are on there, you have your production, you have your in development stuff. So production calibration means that it's what we're using. That's the latest version. And any of the calibrators, you, Alex, Dakota, Brandon, and myself, we pick from those same production files, and we make sure the right injector data is used, same data. So we're all going to use the same that value file, if you will, to do it. Same math curves that we start with. One tuner isn't going to do anything different than the other tuner. As far as technique when tuning, it's kind of one of those rolling educational things, as you're aware. As I would say, I consider myself the lead calibrator, so it kind of like starts at the top, and if I learn something, I trickle it down. So we all, like, if it's something I know that we're all going to be doing the same of constantly. I trickle it down and educate. So we all do the same thing. So if we go and change everybody's name in the ticket system to Alex or Brandon, or one day we changed it to Jon Jr. for all of them as a joke, and no one knew the difference, and they thought they were dealing with me all day. I think we did it for longer than 24 hours, and it was really funny. People thought they just didn't know.
Woo, John! Thank you, John.
Yeah, it was a good psych experiment. So I think people focus on too much of who is doing it versus what they're doing it with. So you have to remember that we're all tuning off the same brainchild. So, and we all contribute to it. So there's stuff that each of us can learn that comes back to the group, and we all discuss it and say, yeah, that makes sense. We'll start doing that. Okay. I don't really have a good example of that, but it can be.
Well, today was a good example. I think we were talking off the record, and I'm not going to get too into, but about cams on certain engines.
Yeah.
And it was one of those, oh shit, let's see if there's a physical mechanical difference in the cam, and if we can verify it in the tune. Mm-hmm. Jake subsequently did find out there were two different part numbers for that. I don't know if he hit you up on the text about that.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are two different part numbers for what we were talking. Sorry to be vague, guys, but we want to keep it kind of to ourselves until we vet everything properly. And that's what we do. We do a lot of this back and forth, and then that final file ends up in production. So then a lot of people think it's a base file, but honestly, the stuff in production is so well vetted. Like, I'll give you an example. The GT350 Whipple file, right? That thing has gotten such great attention in the last 2 or 3 months that I'm confident that calibration is damn good. All we have to do is make sure fueling is good and a couple things in spark, and make sure it's good for the fuel in your area. And we are confident it's going to be good. Don't think of it as a base like, oh my God, it's so crap, we have to really, chug along with it. 9 times out of 10, it's so well vetted that if we think there's an issue, it's usually on the other end of things as opposed to the calibration.
Yeah, and I think base, I don't like using the base word, but it's been floating around the industry for so long that it just kind of sticks. So I think when people think of base, they think it's like it's a stock file with 3 changes in it. Well, the Lund Racing base, naturally aspirated tunes have probably 60 to 70 changes in them. So whether they're small or large. And even we don't start with a just bone stock file and start laying crap onto it, because I don't like to do it that way. I like to start with something that's already been dialed in, set, and more often than not, you can switch between certain blowers using the same calibration without really changing much besides the MAF curve and injector data. And for the non-tuners out there, they may not understand how that works, and maybe we can have a separate discussion on that later, but then we're getting into like how to tune.
Exactly.
So
then we can open the tuning school.
Yeah, right. And I think there's some tuners out there that disagree with that method, but I would argue to them as why when it works. So, someone asked, oh, that was Senior. He said, talk Texas 2K. We'll talk about that in a little bit. James Akins says, thanks for your help this past weekend. You're welcome. He did 2 880s at 157 miles an hour in class racing, which is really cool because he did it while racing. And his car's 3,900 pounds or 3,800 pounds, sorry, with him in it, it's heavy. It's got a EDP single turbo kit, and the IATs were like 200 degrees out the back. So
exactly.
Yeah, it's got more in it, just with better temps. So, and maybe you want to talk about that? Have you had that discussion before?
About IATs?
Yeah. So I forget the literature that I found on it, but basically the rough, and it's not really that rough because I think I've seen it on a dyno before, back to back, but every 10-degree decrease or increase is worth roughly 1% of your total horsepower. So if you're making 1,000 horsepower and you have a 10-degree change in IAT, you're going to lose or gain 10 horsepower. So if your IATs are 200 degrees and you make 1,000 horsepower at 200 degrees, and you can drop it 100 degrees, you're going to pick up 100 horsepower.
Of course, exactly.
Yeah. So I calculated in his example, if we gained 100 degrees in temps or lost,
right?
He would pick up 3 mile an hour.
So 160.
It would go 160 at probably a low 870, maybe a 860 something. Yeah. And so that's exponentially, as you go faster, the ET that you get is exponentially less. So it takes more power to go quicker.
Now, a lot of people that have an air-to-air because they want to keep it street friendly.
Yeah.
Aside using meth or anything else, what do you recommend for someone like James Akins, who has a big power single turbo car with an air-to-air that he likes to drive on the street? What would we suggest to keep IAT low when he does some actual racing?
So if he was going to keep this intercooler for budget reasons or whatever, I would suggest water meth. And I wouldn't do 100% meth because it's easy to overfuel. So, and you can't really run a bigger jet with it. So, because then it's so rich and you have to depend on the fuel trims, the closed loop control to pull the fuel out. And that can be dangerous. So let's say you're watt and you're trying to target, 0.78 lambda. Or for the normal people, it's 11.5 air fuel. And it's pulling 20% fuel, but then all of a sudden the meth quits working. What's going to happen? It's going to not react quick enough. It's going to spike lean, and that lean spike could be, unless you have a good base fuel in the tank like E85, you can have a bad day. So I like to use the water to help tame that down, and the water has some cooling properties to it. I know we've done 50-50 mixes before, and it works really good. So we did it on our EcoBoost, and it worked well until it blew up, but that's not why it blew up. So,
but yeah, right at the starting line too. You really oiled down the starting line. Out of all the places to oil down, right at the starting line.
I'm glad I did it there and not down the track, but Senior said to send it, so I sent it. We can do do you want to talk TX2K?
Yeah, let's do TX2K and see who's going to be there, what we're there to do, and kind of what the game plan is when it comes to TX2K. Because I know what my game plan was, but it evolved in the last.
Have you talked about that yet, or do you want to talk about it? Or are you saving it?
No, I'm not saving it. I can talk about it real quick. So the Fairmont, due to things beyond my control, and parts really, that's basically it, will not be a Texas 2K. I literally was hoping to have everything done and tested, at least one test hit before going to Texas 2K. But honestly, it became kind of a rush thing. And then parts that needed to come in didn't come in on time. And then planning the build out. It's kind of a decent sized build to kind of whittle down within 2 months. So it was tough and I wasn't able to do it. So I said, you know what, I'm not going to put pressure on myself and potentially build something dangerous. So I'm just going to do it right. And then the next event will be later on, but I will not be at Texas 2K Racing. But Lund Racing did say, hey, Alex, are you willing to come down to work the event? So that's something that we can talk about. What are we going to do? Our capacity? When are we going to be there? And what kind of tuning support do we offer?
So we are flying out Thursday, I believe, and it'll be all day flying because I think we have 2 legs to do. I think we're meeting with you in Atlanta,
yes.
And then flying out to Houston from there. Obviously, there's nothing going on there Thursday. I think roll racing is going on. But
Wednesday and Thursday, but the drag race stuff really starts happening Friday night because that's the test and tune and testing, and then it really starts to ramp up the drag racing portion after Friday.
Yeah, and I think we may go to the track Thursday to go check it out if we get there in time. Otherwise, we're just gonna kind of hang loose a little bit, and then, like Senior said already, we're probably going to be hanging out with the midnight performance camp down there, since that's where most of the cars are going to be coming from. And I believe a few of them are going to be running in the event, as well as some other events going on. So
Yeah,
I
unofficial.
don't know what our plan is on those. We may make an appearance, but we'll keep it on the low.
Right.
So and we got to get Manuel out of bed in the morning to make it to the track. So
I don't think he sleeps all that much during this week, honestly.
yeah, well, today he told me he woke up at 8 and then went back to sleep. And I was like, "Why'd you do that? Your body's starting to train for next week already."
Exactly.
But as far as support, we'll be around. Obviously, we're flying out there on our own dime. It's mostly because we want to experience the event. Senior and I have never been, and we, we're going to help support any way we can. If you have a car down there and you're running it and you want to bring us a log while we're in the pit, you can do that. Just introduce yourself first and tell us what car you have, because sometimes some people introduce themselves with their screen name and I'm like, I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
And
if you 69. I'm like, okay.
And don't tell me your ticket number, because I don't remember any of those. So usually I can remember the name and the car and what the mod list is. So otherwise, if you have, we want to, if we're supporting a bunch of cars, which that's our plan at the event, or even after hours, I don't know how that's going to work, but we like to be centralized so that people bring us their N-gauges or bring us their SCT devices or a USB stick with the log on it, so that we can pull it up, pull your tune up, look at the log, make changes, give you a tune back on the stick, N-gauge, SCT device, and say, here, go make another pass. If we have to run around, that makes it 10 times harder, because then you got other guys looking for you while you're out. But we'll have 3 people there, so it should be a little bit less chaotic, but we just like to stay centralized. So, we may be sitting at a table in a trailer or whatever. I don't know what, just chilling. So
yeah, the way it works with the unofficial stuff is usually it's similar to the trek, right?
yeah,
You'll meet somewhere and they'll make the run, come back and say, hey, it blew up. Why? Or, hey, it didn't ship properly. Why? And we'll say, well, because you went 250 miles an hour. So, it's one of those things where it's so cool. I know you've never been. I'm telling you, I miss Houston during this time of year. It's so much fun, so much racing. Cars that you've never seen before or never thought you'd see are all in one place for a week, like
yeah,
all over the world. And you're like, holy crap, this is legit. So it'll be fun to be tuners on the spot. You're probably racing yourself at that point, right? Because
yeah.
these guys are all racing each other. But it's cool just to be able to offer that support to such a popular street racing and track racing event. Obviously, we're there at track capacity first. But, at nighttime, if we look at a couple logs, we look at a couple logs,
Yeah, and I think, we'll have to be in that capacity to stay up a little bit later than we usually do. But, that's Red Bull and Monster help with that. So does adrenaline, I guess. But
it's fun. It's a ton.
I heard the event, you don't really get a lot of runs in, but
you can. So what happens is if you're in the drag race portion, you get 3. You pay for the event. You get 3 or 4 test and tunes. Then you get 3 qualification passes throughout the week.
So 6.
So 6. And if you're smart, you stay for the Friday night test and tune, because the Friday night test and tune is so lit. It's not even funny, because everybody tries to get in on that test and tune. So you see 6-second, Supras. You see everyone in that test and tune, and the prep is still that Miller prep that's just badass. So
it should be better at night when the sun's down. So because then he'll make it really, really sticky. So.
And then you get the locals that don't necessarily run the event, but they want to run against cars that are in the event, or the street guys that say, I don't care about drag stuff, but I'm going to come here and fuck some of you guys up. Ooh, sorry. It's a Lund Racing channel. But that's basically the vibe. It's such a cool vibe there, and everyone's super chill and good at the track that it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I know there's a customer that Evolution Performance built. It's been low 8s. It's a 6R80 car, but it's got a new setup with a 4R200 hub. and they're bringing it out. It's not a clone of the blue car because it's a little heavier, but it's very similar. So if we can repeat a 7-second pass with that, I'll be pretty stoked. And then there's
is it silver?
Silver, yep. It's a Hellion top mount kit. And then Jesus will have his 18, and there'll be a couple other 15, 17 cars with either 6R80 or 4R200 hub. And there'll be auto welds kits. So just mostly turbo stuff. And I think there's a customer named Raphael. He's got a 6R80. It's like 6R80 heaven down there. He's got a 6R80 swap Shelby. It's a 13 Shelby with L&M cams. He's been 9-0.
Wow.
So he took down Sal Ortega's stock short block record. And I think he's probably going to be going for 8s. I don't know if he's going to be running the event or not. I think he's trying to get a spot. So there's probably going to be some other guys down there that we just don't know. And it's like, I remember being home when all this goes down, and this week we get littered with emails from 400 horsepower cars all the way to 1,000 horse, and they just either won it all last minute. It's like insane what happens, and it's gotten worse or better. I don't know how to look at it over the years. So it's more stressful than like NMRA events for some reason.
NMRA doesn't hold a candle to Texas 2K because it's not just the track stuff. The whole city is racing. Like the whole freaking city is racing in 3 massive highway loops nonstop all night. Then they get some chicken and waffles, and they start again at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock the next day. Then they go to the track. It starts Monday or Sunday night. You know what I saw last year that made me go, wow, this is a thing. People camped out at Walmart with their camper, their trailer, and their race car at Walmart, nowhere near a track. It was like, well, I'm racing on this highway later tonight, so I'm going to camp out at Walmart because they're racing right here. It's like, whoa. It's so cool.
Yeah, that's crazy and it's almost like they're allowed to get away with it for a few days, and then it gets cracked down towards the end, but it seems pretty monumental. So
yeah, that's why it's one of those things that I think when my previous employer wondered if we should go, I said absolutely, and they sold out of shirts immediately. Rebecca's car did real well, made it to I think the quarterfinals or something like that. It was just like one of those great events because there's so many Mustangs there, but not many Mustang centric companies. But the nice thing is now you start seeing people like Manuel really pop off and start really making waves down there and supporting. And if we come and support those customers' cars, it just makes the whole product better. And I think that's a good look.
Right. We'll try to bring some swag. I don't know how much we can fit in our bags, but I'll have a discussion with the.
If you bring 500 hats, I think 500 hats will sell. Like literally will sell.
Yeah.
Someone paid to answer a question.
So Nick Crush, high horsepower street cars. Can you tune available torque by gear and tune the TCS so the car always achieves maximum available grip in any situation? So all that's dependent on the ABS module, and torque by gear isn't, but traction control definitely is. So if you're on the street and you have drag radials and you have the traction control on, and we don't do anything, and it spins even the slightest amount, it's pretty intrusive. So we do some stuff to tame down the traction control. So it prioritizes spark over throttle, spark over throttle and fuel, because Ford will go into enleanment to pull torque out. So the problem is if you're making a lot of boost and it goes into enleanment, they can have a bad day. And I've been in a car where it's done that, one of our own, and it got real aggressive and it just gets angry fast. But and there's some logic behind that. And it'll actually go round robin through the cylinders and it'll start turning off the cylinders until it gets traction. So it was a pretty weird feeling when it happened. But I don't think the OEM computer's equipped well enough to do it like a standalone would. And the torque by gear I've played with, but it's really surface and tire dependent, and that surface changes pretty drastically depending on pavement versus asphalt and temperature outside. Um, and obviously pavement's going to hook better. And if there's been rubber laid by whatever, it just depends on what you're doing. So to answer his question, our calibrations already have some traction control stuff modified, but depending on the application, if it's like a turbo car, really your best weapon is going to be able to use a good boost controller to manipulate boost by gear or boost by mile an hour. So if you go out and you're doing 100 miles an hour and you can hook with it all in on a kind of crappy surface, then you should be good on a better surface. So that's that at 100 mile an hour, you got to have all the power, and below that, that's where you got to tinker. And a lot of the torque by gear stuff you have to tinker with, and unfortunately it eats up a lot of time. And it would be better if Nick had the ability to do it himself. And maybe we'll get to that point at some point in the future. Us doing it remotely, though, we would have to we'd have to charge extra for it. That's a lot of time and effort to go make it perfect for everything. We could maybe ballpark it. And if someone asks us that, I would probably be the one that takes it, because I usually get a little bit more time to deal with some of that stuff, but I don't know. Usually I tell people it's not a good one to do.
It's one of those things where that's where my old school mentality comes in. Like, why do a lot of people, I don't understand people wanting like a street tire, a Pirelli P0, and then having torque by gear come into play when old school suspension setup and tire can usually alleviate a lot of that. And it's a lot. I guess it's almost like they just want to be able to smash it, like put it to the wood and have the tune work for them. And unfortunately, I would rather someone do that on their end. Learn a little bit. You can't just smash the gas on a 1-2 shift, taking a left turn and expect the car to hook all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of hook, what's that?
It might spin out.
Yeah. Joe Glockner asked, any progression on second gear leave 6 or 80? So we can make it leave in second gear off foot brake, but I don't have a trans brake yet. I'm waiting on a couple customers to test for me. I have an idea. I know how to make it work. I'm just trying to do it a different way. Jose Silva. Man, I read that wrong. Sorry, Jose. I'm Lund tuned and noticed there's a stutter when I stab the throttle. It seems like the motor is rocking back and forth. 2018 GT manual, E85 tune. Should I upgrade the mounts or input? I would have to see a data log. The best thing to do is whoever you're dealing with on your ticket is just explain that. Say, here's a log of the issue, and try to keep it real short, because if you go out and do a 20-minute data log and say, here's a stutter, we're going to look at it and probably not find it. So it's better to start the log, make it do it as best as you can, and then stop the log. It depends on what RPM you're doing at. What I think he's describing is possibly a little bit of drive
or low RPM.
Yeah. It's that drivetrain slack. And with tunes, we're turning off some of that torque management or softening it so it's not as intrusive. Because what people complain of when they have a tune is response. It doesn't feel raw enough. So then you give them a tune that they feel everything, you start to feel that stuff. Right. What I'm finding is 03 Cobra guys that have a new Coyote and you turn all that stuff off, they love it. If you have a guy that never owned an 03 Cobra or anything with a cable throttle or Fox body or any of that stuff, and they get a newer car that has all that smooth BMW-like, Mercedes-like, whatever, and you turn it off, they don't like it.
Right.
So
interesting how that works, huh?
Yeah. And for me, I like a little bit of both. But to be able to delineate between both when you tell us about the issue and to understand why it is, half the time, though, maybe not half, more often than not, I can explain what's going on, and customers are like, oh, okay, thanks for explaining, why it does that, why you do it. I don't mind it now. So they don't, it doesn't bother them.
Right. Well, this question I've seen pop up a lot. The Albino S550 asks, I was tuned by you guys with a 16. The life of that car was taken from a person blowing a red light. So now I have an 1810 or 80 car. Do you guys do live tuning? If I bring the car to you, I have the N gauge already. I have asked, a lot of people say, where can I bring my car to have it done by a tuner? Can you explain why, for especially a car like that, it's not really necessary to be there live? And how can we tell them no nicely because it's not necessary? Meaning, we don't think half of the things that people are requesting a live tuning needs it. Is there a way we can kind of explain that to the customer without sounding like dicks, basically?
Well, the best way to explain it is if you brought the car to me, let's say I met you in a Walmart parking lot and I had all my gear with me and you had an N-Gage and I only have 30 minutes to give you. Well, even if I had an hour to give you, I'm going to take the tune that I know already works. I'm going to put it in it because we had a car that's identical to it right off the showroom floor that had the same tune as that car did right off the showroom floor. And I'm going to put my modified tune on it and it's going to feel exactly the same as my car did with the same tune. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to do anything special in person that I wouldn't be able to do with the car 1,000 miles away by looking at a data log. So having it in person does nothing but allow me to hear the engine. And that really on a naturally aspirated setup, that's not really going to benefit tuning at all. So live tuning, even on high horsepower stuff, I think we've proved, time and time again, 12, 13, 14, 1,500 horsepower. I've done some standalone stuff. Actually, all the standalone Holly stuff that I've done so far has been remote, and I haven't had to be in the car to do anything. And I just tell them, send me a video of the pole. That's really easy to do with technology these days, so I can hear it. Pole spark plugs. Send me the log. And it's if I see an issue, pull spark plugs. It's really simple, and I think the attention to, it's not attention to detail, but the attention you give to certain areas is dictated based on the power level that you're dealing with. So right. a naturally aspirated setup really doesn't need that crazy amount of attention because it's not going to benefit anything at all except spend a bunch of time. So really the main thing is we have a shop, we have a dyno, but for me to go take the average 3 to 4 hours to go strap the car on the dyno, hop in the car, flash it, log it, do a few hits, blah, blah, blah. It could take, 3 to 4 hours depending on how busy I am with other stuff during that day. And it's going to take you away just for one car. So I can do 5 cars the same in less time remotely.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Very good. Okay. I just wanted to, because I get that question a lot.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to bring the car to Power by the Hour. Number one, I don't work at Power by the Hour. I work here in my home. I just happen to be there often to have my car worked on or whatever. So there's no mechanism where we can, one, charge you for the time. Two, me physically getting in the car is going to cause me to have my ticket system get backed up. There's just no mechanism for that. And we do such a damn good job remote that I think it's going to save everyone time and money if we just do it remote for pretty simple setups. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say that in some cases we can diagnose issues remotely. Sometimes, like maybe not as well as in person, but I had a car today. It was a 19 GT with a Pro Charger P1 on it. It was down at DDR Concepts in Oklahoma. Okay. And he did a watt pull, and I'm looking at the log, and it's a little bit rich on the fuel trims at wide open throttle. And I'm like, this is a known MAF curve that I've done, 100 times already. And I said, can you make sure the blow-off valve is closing? And he comes back after checking over, and he says there's a pinched vacuum line to the blow-off valve. So it wasn't fully closing. So the boost was lower at that, and the MAF frequency was real low. So it was actually delaying airflow over the MAF versus what I had commanded. So he's going to fix that, and it should fix the issue. Because I shouldn't have to go make a totally different MAF curve for a repeatable combination.
Yeah,
And he was like, that's a great call that you noticed that, because I wouldn't even known to check it, because he says it felt like it had boost.
Right. Yeah, I had a customer do that to me today. I said, could you check your red race blow-off valve just to make sure it's operating properly? He said, Pro Charger told me to put it, this way, and I did. And I'm like, that still doesn't mean that it's operating properly. You have to check everything over. So that'll be something I can hit him up about tomorrow. Joe Flieger has a question about a Gen 1 motor, which I think is a little easy to answer. Joe Flieger says, I want to make max horsepower on my Gen 1, has billet oil pump gears. Single 7675, 4 Innovations E85 fuel system, 1050X. How hard will Lund lean on it? Well, John, what is the horsepower, rear wheel horsepower limit, let's say on a manual Gen 1, where you start to go, that rod is going to exit stage left?
I get over 700 wheels where I get a little worried, but turbo setups it just depends on like what size turbo it is. If it's like a later torque curve, you can sometimes get away with a little bit more power. I've pushed Gen 1s over, I think, 800 before.
Yep.
But man, not a lot of the rods live that long. And with this, it's a single 7675, so it's probably going to have a later torque curve. But once that turbo is fully lit, it's going to be easy to make. It's going to be easy to make 800 horse. So, detuning it is for him. It's going to be harder to detune it. For us, it's going to be like we're going to pull a little timing out.
Yeah.
Or you need a back boost off. But the Circle D5C is, for some reason, he's talking about not blowing up a Gen 1, but the 5C converter is bugging me for some reason on a turbo car.
Exactly. I'm like, 5C? I just saw that. I'm like freaking see a 2B or something, but he's like,
yeah, that's really loose.
So you want to blow it up. Basically, everything you put in there says it's going to blow up.
Well, even if so let's say we left that converter unlocked. So in that converter, I don't think really ever couples. It just slips the whole time.
Just stay stuck.
The whole purpose of that converter is to help it launch really hard in first gear. And if you don't lock it after that, you're not going to have any mile an hour in a naturally aspirated setup. I've tuned blown setups with a 5C, but they were centrifugal. So they have a later, lower torque curve. But for a turbo car, you really don't want that loose. It's going to blow through it, I think. Absolutely. So, and it'll be, when you're in lockup, when it shifts, it has to unlock a little bit and then relock. And when it unlocks, it's going to have all that 5C slip there with turbo behind it.
Joe Flieger says, I will swap it out if need be. See, Joe, the problem is not the turbo. The problem is the Gen 1 motor. It's literally, you can blow up a Gen 1 motor with a little centrifugal, with a 2.3 blower. You literally shouldn't go much past 700 rear wheel horsepower, because no matter what we do, the rod at any moment after that, for whatever reason, if you have a boost spike or bad fuel or whatever, it can literally kick a rod. And when you kick a rod, everything goes. The cylinder head where that rod came off, because the piston's going to fly up in the valves, the block's going to split. You're just going to have a bad time. If I were you, I would save up for at least a Gen 2 block, and then you can make 800 more comfortably. But Gen 1, I wouldn't go past 700 in any capacity.
Yeah, I think I've pushed a Gen 1, but 13, 14 block to 900, but it was a centrifugal, and I don't remember how long it lasted. I think it may have had head studs in it too, which is also going to change some strength characteristics, because those heads move around when you got, lots of cylinder pressure. So,
I'm going to go back to some of the questions that were asked on my Instagram, just see if there's anything that was, I don't know, of note. Here we go. Warkey 5.0 on Instagram says, maybe if you guys can dispel the myth surrounding the Ghost Cam tube, i.e.,
yeah, I remember that one.
It's bad for the motor, drivability, auto or manual, etc. It'll alleviate 24 messages I get a day about it. So,
so the main question is it, let me put my
Bad for the engine.
Bad for the engine. No, it's not bad for the engine. And well, it's hard to explain why without getting super technical, but basically the cam position that we're putting it in, I believe, is a cam position that it passes through at one point in time in the RPM range. And I believe it's for an EGR effect, because the Coyotes don't have EGR on them. So it uses the VCT for it, for emissions. And we just put it in that cam position at a lower RPM where it's slower engine speed. So you're going to hear the overlap of the valves. And we do a little bit with ignition timing, because you can lower the ignition timing at idle, and then you can really hear the separation, which is the chop. So if you ever have a stock cam car and you lower the ignition timing, you can start to hear the separation, because the cams on a Coyote actually aren't that small. The duration's pretty large for a camshaft. That there's nothing in there that's going to hurt the engine. The only thing that we tell people is that if they're running a catalytic converter on it and you have low ignition timing and you have overlap, it can create heat, and sometimes you can heat those parts up a little too much. So we just advise that, not for prolonged use.
Got it.
So
So and remember, guys, it's novelty. What that means is we're probably not going to chase drivability issues with it, right? It is not meant to drive like a Cadillac and then comes to a light and it chops perfectly. To get it to come in and out of that requires a little finagling, and there's an abruptness to it sometimes that is just inherent to the tune configuration. So we disclaim some drive great with no issue, especially Gen 2. My God, Gen 2, I just love.
More forgiving. Yeah.
Tricor is just heaven. And then when someone tells me I have a 2011 Mustang automatic and I want a cam lobe, I'm like, oh God, here we go. But
yeah,
do you have a converter? No. Oh crap. So we end up kind of going, but here's a disclaimer. But for Gen 2, I almost don't even care about it. I'm like, yeah, we know it's going to be okay. Here you go. And it seems to just work.
Well, on the Gen 2, it's more forgiving just purely even on blown applications. I think we have a ghost cam tune for every combination. Yeah. So whether they're probably not the same drivability wise, but I think I tested each and every one of them with one customer at one point in time. And it was like, yeah, it's tolerable for most use, but I probably won't run it all the time because it's a little cantankerous. But even on our blue car with a centrifugal and a converter, it was kind of like you take off from a light and it like lurches. And, I drove around on it for a while and then I got old after a while. So, but they're there. On the older stuff, the logic is different. So it requires a lot more time. And because they're older, we don't devote as much time towards that type of stuff for them, because eventually they'll just kind of the volume that we do for them kind of peters out. So doing super novelty stuff for them isn't as enticing to us. the return on investment is low. Exactly.
Yeah. I saw a guy said, I want a cam lobe for a centrifugal manual 14. I went, we have that. We looked, I'm like, oh, there it is. Crap. Okay.
Yeah, I got it for those. The automatics are a little bit funky, and then CJ setups is like a no-go because I need one in person, and to be honest, I just would like start on it for maybe an hour and I would get so frustrated. I'd be like, come pick up your car.
Yeah, your junk, get it on my house.
Here's a free engage
for your trouble. Okay, Nick's S550 says lean versus rich conditions in terms of air fuel, short-term fuel terms, and long-term, and lambda values, and how to recognize each on data logs. Or boosted pumps versus programmable pumps versus upgraded fuel systems on high horsepower cars, such as a return style fuel system.
This is on your Instagram?
This is on my Instagram, Nick's S550. So basically he's asking boosted pumps, right? I'm thinking he's asking boosted pump or a aftermarket pump like the DW400 and a BAP versus a fuel system on a boosted car. That's kind of what I think he's leaning towards. And he wants us to go over the short-term fuel term and long-term fuel term on data log, but I really don't want to get into that minutia. That's
Yeah,
kind of,
I think you need a visual for most people. Like with that stuff, you got to be able to see what the numbers are and the graphs and what it means. You got to show what lean looks like and what normal looks like. So otherwise, when you start talking lambda and fuel trims, it's, if he's watching, obviously you want your fuel trim to be as close to 1 all the time under closed loop. So that would mean that you're hitting your target lambda. So if it's 1.2, that means it's adding 20%. This is on 2011 up. And if it's 0.8, it's pulling 20% fuel to hit the target. So as far as the booster pumps, I would say he's asking booster pump versus, it would depend on the fuel, really. I mean, obviously E85 will return fuel system all day long. So that's you have enough volume for the ethanol because it requires 40% more volume, fuel by volume, than gas. So as far as 93 goes, stock pump with a booster pump works really good. I mean, It's tried and true. I think people are scared of them because they've heard of like 2 people burning up fuel pumps. But the people that burn up fuel pumps, I think, wire them wrong. So we had a booster pump on our 14 Shelby for 4 years at 20 volts and never had one problem with those pumps. And those are twin Coyote pumps, OEM. So it's the same pump. They just put 2 in. So, which is the same pump that we see in the Siley fuel system, the base one. So I don't think the D-Torx 400 pump is worth it over a stock pump with a booster pump because I've still seen pressure drop up top. The other culprit for pressure drop sometimes is the feed line and being too small. There's also 18s have some crossover line. I'd have to show a picture, but if you run the stock rails and you have quad 465 pumps in the tank, you're gonna get pressure drop, and it's very odd because you wouldn't expect it. Well, come to find out, there's a crossover line that's real small, and it restricts so bad the pressure doesn't get to the rails. And if you upgrade that, everything's fixed. So sometimes it's not just about the pump; it's about what you're trying to shove pressure through. So, and at some point, you can make those lines as big as you want. It's not going to do anything. Like there's a stopping point, but that's another topic for a different day.
It's okay. So. He's on, actually. His name is Nick Lovelace on YouTube, and he says, I'm watching, and my short terms are 1.15, and my long terms are 0.78, chasing a lean condition. Well, it's not lean, right? Because if the long terms are 0.78 and the shorts are 1.15, did it learn something funky? Could it be a math curve issue at that point?
Yeah, we'd have to. He would have to comment on what setup it is, like what blower. I've seen that before on a couple things, and what I think is happening, if it's an S550, I've seen it where they go watt and the long term goes to 0.8 or 0.7 something, and then the fuel trim's trying to bake that back in. So something has learned incorrectly based on a transition somewhere. So really, if we're tuning it, obviously if he's asking us and we're tuning it, we would want to see that log, and then we would turn off adaptive, and then we would have you do that big long data log again, and maybe not do a full watt pull if it's going lean, just to see what's going on. It says Whipple Gen 3 95-pound injectors, long tubes, 3-inch Corsa. That's odd on that one.
Yeah.
That's odd. Are they D-Torque 495s?
Yeah, I would think they're D-Torque 95s, unless there's another 95 that I don't know about, because FIC calls them the 1000H. Right. Injector dynamics is 1000 or 1050, so I'm thinking it's a D-Torque 95. And if we're tuning it, man, just send us a log, and then kind of we'll see what the deal is, and then we'll have to, and the long log, idle, slow rev, and a partial watt.
It says they're DW 95s. Yeah. Nick, when did we tune it?
This is like a live chat with one person. He must be like, wow, they're talking to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll wait for his answer. Perfect.
Brandon has reviewed it a couple times. All right.
So it's in the
So
system. So
it's recent. Yeah. I'll make a note to look at it tomorrow. I'm going to do that right now.
Yeah, dude, make a note. We'll take a look and we'll get you taken care of. See, we got you. We're even on live stream. We're checking you out.
And I assume it's S550. Who says bye-bye? Senior's off?
Senior,
Okay,
I guess
bye.
he's in bed. It's early. What's he got to get up early? What's he doing?
I
Man,
don't know.
It's early as
There's
hell.
motor, trans, and turbo kit.
Oh yeah, you're right. So for those of you that don't know, the guy that's actually wrenching on all the vehicles back at it's Senior. Like
Yeah.
he's literally putting motors together, and like he's the guy that. So when you see that car on the ground running, he put it together. Okay.
Yeah. It's a pride thing at this point.
No, I get it 100%.
But he's a very good wrench. So, and he likes to have control over everything with the car while he's driving it. So I think it's not something you see often, you know.
The guy who built it, drives it, has a sub tune it. It's good to go.
Yeah. Roderick asks, if you were to switch from DW400 and BAP to return style fuel system, what's your return style fuel system of choice to tune with?
We all know this answer. We can all say it together, but you know, the choice return system. What do you think it is?
We have a 4 system on R18, dual regulator, but on lower power you can get away with 1 regulator on the 2018. I prefer dual because it keeps pressure on the pump.
I have a 4 Innovations fuel system on my red car, single regulator, and it's NA. So I mean, I'll never need a BAP. I'll never need anything. I'm just such a believer in the product. The F3C controller is F2C controller that I have is real nice. It's super nice. It's easy. No issues with that system at 900 plus wheel when it was supercharged. So now at 390 wheel, it's got plenty of fuel.
George, I think this is George at Nemesis. He asked, John tuned my Whipple setup recently. This is George. He asked if we do Boostane plus 93. Yes, we can do that. So I think he asked me about it last week, and I forget if I sent the last email or not. But if you're wanting a Boostane tune, what I prefer to do is usually I log it on the current tune, and then I just to make sure knock sensor's happy, everything, and then I add the timing in before I go ahead and give you a tune with more timing. So if you want to do another log on the street, George, you can just do that with Boostane added, and then I'll take a look, and then I'll throw in a few more degrees of timing. So if we're under like 21 degrees of timing, 4 more degrees from 17 to 21 can pick up 50, 60 horsepower.
Yep.
So just depending, usually E85 picks up more than gas though. Wow, we have a lot of people in here.
That's cool. No, it's cool. I mean, I'm happy to see that a lot of people. Who the hell downvoted this twice? What maniac downvoted this live stream twice? You see the thumbs up and the thumbs down. Someone down thumbed it twice.
Really?
By Senior. It's like, oh, damn, I'm out of here.
Can you see that somewhere?
No, that'd be funny. No, hell no. That'd be funny as hell if you could figure out who it was. Someone doesn't like this. Brr. Some curmudgeon.
We're not liked by all. It's okay.
Yeah.
I'm used to it.
It's all good. Basically, a lot of people. I'm gonna kind of scan through if there's anything you want to pick
that's what I was gonna do. Carolina Speedworks, what's up? How's it going?
They're on?
Yeah, I guess.
Man. Oh, there we go. Okay, just came through. What's that really shitty internet?
Oh, man.
Talking about the Edelbrock 2650 front feed earlier on. Jon Sr. Jon Sr. kind of delved into it a little bit about could the Edelbrock 2650 compete with the Gen 5, yada, yada. I don't think we have enough of a sample. But the Gen
Someone's
5
asked about the Gen 5 Whipple
versus the Edelbrock 2650.
The Gen 5, on an 18.
18 up, sorry. Yeah, 18 up.
The limitation for the Elderbrock would be the inlet, but if you go to the bigger inlet, they're competitive. I mean, the 2650 makes higher RPM. It makes high RPM power similar to a Whipple. So it doesn't get up and run away from its torque curve. It just kind of complements it. So we have
Steve is coming in next week to Power by the Hour, and he's going to put an Elderbrock in his 18.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure we'll get some firsthand experience on that, and I'll probably be there just to kind of film it, see how it goes, and see how the whole tuning thing goes. But I don't think he has a fuel system, so he'll be pump gas. So that'll be interesting how much it can make on a pump gas setup. See how forgiving it is.
Usually your fuel down there is pretty good. So
yeah, it's decent. He gets it somewhere, I think, like a racetrack, and they seem to be okay. If you get it in a marathon, you're fucked.
I'm beginning to see, and this is even on GT350s with higher compression, is they don't like much over 8-9 pounds of boost on 93.
Yep.
And if you have crap 91 from California, Oklahoma is the worst. It's like the absolute worst. You might as well not even put boost on the car. Like, just it really, I mean, even naturally aspirated, I think the knock sensor pulls timing on the stock tune in Oklahoma.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So an 1819 naturally aspirated, I think they don't really see much over like 19 degrees of timing.
Wow.
Which is like, you know, they
27 here.
Yeah. Don't even buy a tune because unless you're going to run the 85, it's just not worth it. And we'll tell you that if you're from Oklahoma and we see it, we're going to say, hey, just letting you know. And that's just because we don't want to take your money and then have, you know, not give you, like, we won't be able to give you anything, you know. It's just I don't feel good about it when we do that. So
when someone tells me, hey, can you really push this combo, and it's pump gas, I go, push it where? No offense. I mean, you're only going to do as well as your fuel. So, but when somebody says, hey, I have a 85, I'm like, hey, I know what the limits are. I know how much spark these cars can tolerate. I send it. Rami is one of those good examples. He goes, okay, we're going to dial it in on 93 and get what we can get, but we're going to move over to C85. He doesn't do E85. He goes right to C85. And I'm like, naturally aspirated? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, here you go. And he's just super happy, and his customers love it. So I'm like, hey, whatever. I
think it's an old mentality, which is interesting because a lot of kids, I mean, they're, you know, my age, and they're all in that 20 to, you know, late 30s range. They have this mentality that pump gas is 93 octane is like the best. And I think that's like 20 years ago, it may have been better fuel. I think over the years, in 20 years, 93 octane has changed like drastically. So it's not the same. You can't just you can't just hope, you can't just trust it. So there's every gas station does things differently, and location, and season. It's like I always tell guys, season to season, location. And what do you mean? You know,
all the truck drivers make me laugh because they say, I deliver trucks, and the same truck goes to racetrack, goes to Sunoco, goes to BP. I go, right, but why is it that when your truck delivers to a Marathon gas station, those knock sensors go off, but what a BP, a Shell, or a Texaco doesn't? And he's like, well, they do change the additives. I'm like, oh, so it's not exactly the same. There are different additives. He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, shut up. Please be quiet. Please stop.
The detergents to help clean your fuel system.
Exactly. So they're like,
it's all government mandated stuff for EPA. So we'll just leave it there. Or else they're gonna ascend on my house.
They're knock on your door. Oh shit. Okay. Cool. So we've been on for a little over an hour. It's up to you if you want to call it or want to keep answering some of these questions. I mean, it's been pretty damn successful, 100 plus on this channel.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Yeah, we promoted it pretty good. 100.
Which is good. I want to make sure that people can come here. We can answer questions directly to you. It's hard sometimes to get a hold of us. That's why on Facebook it's almost impossible to be on and not, get some kind of tuning question. So if you have any questions, save them for something like this, and we can answer a lot of your questions on a live stream. Trust us, whether it's here, Instagram, or wherever we do it. most of your questions will get answered, and we'll post this up so in case you missed anything, we'll be able to put it back
Yeah,
up.
if we had to deal with all these questions through social media, it would be a full-time job for that. So, if it's something where you have a question about your car is being tuned currently and you have a question and there's a tuner assigned to it, if you ask the question, we're going to reply because it's our job. We like to, and I hate having unread messages in my ticket queue. So I want to be 0 by the end of the day.
I'm looking at mine and they're 18, and when I left it was like 5, and I'm like, should I answer these right now? Like, man, because if I do, they're just going to reply again. It'll be 18, 20,
Yeah.
25 tomorrow. So I'm going to say, let me do it within 9 to 5 because that's when I'm obligated to. I'm not doing it out of the kindness of my own heart, because if you reply to a ticket at midnight, they're going to reply back at 12:01.
I picture everybody like sitting in their like pajamas and they're like in their car on their phone because it's so instant and they're connected to their Wi-Fi and they're like, is he going to reply? And as soon as they get that notification, and they fire it up and they go log, and then you come back and it's like, how did he log so fast? It's 9:00 at night.
Yep,
I was ready. It's like,
yeah.
Don't you have a family?
Yeah, but Texas 2K is next week.
Yeah, exactly. I have the whole week off. I'm like, what?
Exactly. Yes, some people take Texas 2K week off, and it's like people that go to Burning Man or whatever. They take Texas 2K week off. Blows my mind.
That's crazy.
I'm lucky that I'm in a position where I get paid to be at these events, so I don't have to take them off. Like when I used to work at BNP, I'd go to Mustang Week, I'd go to Carlisle, that people actually vacation around, and I'd be like, I get paid to be here. So, but you don't take it for granted. You feel lucky, but you still, your mind goes, you took a week off for this, man.
Yeah, people die hard. It's crazy.
Exactly.
Well, I don't. I see people talking to each other in here. Maybe that's when you know when. When you know it's done.
Started to ignore you. They just paid attention to the chat.
What power would Jesus put on his S550? Oh, I thought he was talking about Jesus. He's talking about Jesus.
Jesus?
What power? That goes back to our conversation this morning. Supercharger versus turbo.
And nitrous.
He would do. We haven't talked about this. And maybe we'll end on this. Compressed air. Oh yeah.
Compressed air?
Yeah.
Yes.
The ultimate.
The ultimate, but which version of the compressed air?
What it was. Didn't you see the video we were yapping about last week? Senior found it. You'd look it up on YouTube. It's compressed air power adder, and there's some Camaro with it. It makes like 400 horse naturally aspirated, and they have this compressed air system that sends has like a big throttle body looking regulator to the inlet.
Holy shit!
It makes 800 horsepower.
Compressed air supercharging, Bill Sport.
Yes.
What the hell is that? Oh,
but you don't have to change the tune-up at all.
What? It's just more, but you got to add fuel, don't you?
I believe you have to add supplemental fuel, but you can run the same ignition timing.
What the hell?
Yeah.
You're basically shoving air in, which is a turbo and what a supercharger are doing, but it's finite, right?
It's instant. It's
like a nitrous tank, right? It runs out.
Well, you got to run like 3 in the trunk, so they have like a video showing it and the technology behind it. But it is insane. It's like it gets regulated down in pressure, and it comes out at like a certain pressure, but in the tank it's super high. But it comes out. The coolest part, no pun intended, is how cold it is. It drops the charge temps like 80 degrees. Better than nitrous. Yeah.
Wow. And that's compressed air.
Compressed air. So, and it's in a sealed vacuum. So they seal it off. So there's no more ambient air from the outside coming in. It's just purely running off of compressed air when you flip it on. It like has a 3-way, and it changes so that the intake sucks only from the compressed air So now you have this naturally aspirated engine, and you basically changed the density of the air going into it. So you basically changed the DA in the engine. So now you have this. So your power curve is going to look the same as it was in A. It's just going to be 400 more everywhere.
So does that mean if I wanted to recharge my compressed air charging system, I can just do it with the air compressor?
Yeah.
Whoa. Oh my God.
If you had the electrical system for it, you could do it like some guys do with their boost controller. They don't have to run CO2. They just have a compressed air tank in the back with a pump, and it cycles on.
Let's do it to the red car. Let's do it to the red car. Screw it. Because I don't care if that motor blows up, right?
Like,
we can, right? Let's do it to the red car. Let's get freaking compressed air supercharging in the red. I have the fuel system for it.
Let's email them up and see what they say.
Yeah. Let's see if
I think some nitrous guy owns it. I think it's Nitrous Express, the owner of Nitrous Express.
Yeah. People are now listening to how we talk like during work, because they go, "Oh my God," we just like ignore everything, and we're like,
sounds like high-tech leaf blower super. It's way different.
It's way different. No, you got to look at the video.
It's coming out in super high pressure and super cold temp. The charge temp alone picks up power.
Man, that blows my mind, because I come from a millwright world, and I know exactly what it can do and how it can work. I just never even thought of it. Like, never even thought of it.
You watch the video when we're done, and your head will explode.
That's so cool.
And it doesn't look that hard to engineer either.
Dude, I'll find a way. I mean, Jake, if I tell Jake about this, he's gonna 3D print something with with that working. He's like, "Oh, I got a 3D printer. I'll do it right now." All right, so we can get off tangents here. So it's up to you if you want to end it here, and then we can maybe, do it again next week sometime. Do it like a weekly thing, because obviously we have a lot of subjects to cover, and today was just kind of like a short version. And then
maybe if we do it next week, we could do it from TX2K. When we're actually sitting in the same room. So we could do it there and do it we could do different live stuff there while we're, whatever we're doing. Hooning and tuning.
Racing. They'll probably have us race one of the cars. Who knows? They'll probably say, "Here's the keys." I'm like, "Okay, let's go." But yeah, cool. Oh, someone paid, so we got to answer this question real quick. Man.
Okay.
Oh, someone gave you money. Oh.
This is our lunch money.
Yeah.
What return fuel system do you recommend to switch to E85? And should I get Cook's catless headers as to not worry about frying the cats? Thanks again. So what combination is it? What car is it? We need to know year, make, model.
RS3. So that would be a 15 RS3 Roush supercharged TVS 15 up car.
So we already mentioned earlier, we all like the 4 innovation stuff. We've had that on our personal cars. It works real well. And a twin 465 pump. Now there's different 465 pumps on there, but the basic, I think is that the part number is a F267. That pump will be fine. You'll need at least 1000 cc injectors. My preference is injector dynamics, but any of the basic 1000 cc injectors will work. And should I get Cook's catless headers as to not worry about frying the cats? It's up to your location that you're located in as far as emissions goes.
Good answer. Or you can get a free flowing exhaust, but it is subject to the laws in your state.
Yes, so we can send you a temporary diagnostics calibration to support that modification as far as what it does. So
exactly, just like that.
But it may not pass emissions. So you need to have the proper exhaust to pass emissions.
Yes.
Yes. Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Yay, EPA.
Yay, whoever's watching. All right, what happened?
He just said, yo.
Yo, okay, so he's happy that we answered his question, basically. All right, let's get out of here before they start paying us more money to get in trouble.
All right.
I'll let you end it. Thanks for hosting the live stream, sir. And whenever you want me on again, I'll be happy to get in there.
Yes, sir. We'll talk to you guys later. Yep. Bye.
See ya.